Okay, great.
Perfect.
As I mentioned earlier, my name is Todd Hallett. I'm here from TK Design and Associates. We're based out of South Lyon, but we've been working for the last 15 years all over the country. We've worked in over 30 different states. And what's really cool about that is we've had the opportunity to watch the trends go across the country. So what we typically see is that a lot of the trends start on the West Coast. We'll see them start in California, work their way through Nevada, kind of skip over to Texas, work their way in Florida and the Carolinas, and then slowly work their way up to the Midwest. In this area right here, that's what I call the dead zone. Nothing ever happens there. The three things to do today. We're going to do 3 topics: exterior do's and don'ts, our 5 trends that I see for 21, and a current project that we're working on. So when we find out when we're doing renovations, a lot of times we're doing whole house renovations, and it has a pretty dramatic effect on the way the house looks. This client in particular wanted to take this small ranch in Plymouth and convert it to a 2-story, add a 2nd floor on it, and convert it to a farmhouse looking house. So we started here, and that's where we ended up. We took and we added the 2nd floor on. We have a lot of detail that relates to the farmhouse look. You can see there's some board and batten on it, a small little porch, and you can see the 2 side by side. There's pretty substantial difference. Another one that we did recently is in Walled Lake. This gem, this is a few years ago, and it was a bi-level. And what they wanted to do was update it a little bit. So we took this house and we turned it into this one. So again, when we're doing renovations, a lot of times we're doing entire whole house renovations, and we're doing a lot of exteriors. So that's why I want to talk about some of the things that I see that are working well and some of the things that aren't working so hot. Start with masonry. A lot of architects and builders have a hard time figuring out how to do a really nice blend with masonry and brick and stone and brick. Like, here's an example of a good one. This one has really nice brick and stone combinations. The stone and the brick are both in the same color range, which is nice. There's not a lot high contrast. The scale is appropriate. You can see that, you start to build up stone in the corners as if it were built that way initially. And that's an appropriate looking stone brick combo. But what we see a lot of times is something like this, where there's brick there, but there's this random placement of stone within the field of brick. It kind of looks like, and this one reminds me of Tetris, where you just have these random shapes that are in there, and then these kind of stone coins. And this one's not the worst one that I've ever seen. This one is. So this is an example of how it can really get sideways when you're trying to mix brick and stone together. There's a huge problem with scale in this one. So that's one thing to keep a lookout for. This is pretty subtle. The stone and the brick are not mixed in there, but you see that you have this highlighted stone area, another highlighted stone area here. It's almost like a white stone with a reddish brick. We see that all the time now in our market, but that's going out fast. It's this ideal, this high contrast between stone and brick, and it's starting to look really dated. So I'd stay away from that. Here's another mistake that people make with masonry is they'll take a heavy stone area and they'll float it. So it feels like it's hanging above. The stone should be on the base. It's a heavy material. It shouldn't look like it's floated. Here's an example. I saw this online, and I saw this one had a caption with that. Only the most depraved individuals are capable of such a horrible thing. I totally agree. So I saw that, I'm like, yep, that's absolutely accurate. Here is one that we did in Oklahoma. That is in my mind, a nice example of how to mix stone and brick together. The colors are complementary. They're not competing with each other. It's just a nice mix. Another thing we look at a lot of times in terms of do's and don'ts are what people are doing with columns. So it's easy on a renovation or a new construction to kind of get the scale wrong on columns. Here's an example of one where the columns are completely under scale. So you can see how it doesn't give it an authentic look to that front of that home. Here's another one I saw recently where they don't even look like they tried. I mean, it's just literally these little 2 columns that they got. They must have saved some money on them, but they're really, really poorly done. And that's something that jumps out right away in terms of, making a home look authentic. Here's a great example of how columns can be used on houses. This is a really nice scale. It's in proportion. And even when you're doing even when you're doing a larger scaled column, like in this case, this Craftsman, you can still have it turn out nicely. Another one that we look at, we see a lot of errors on our shutters. So if you look at this house, at first glance, it looks pretty good. You've got stone in the right spot, the siding looks fine. But when you really look at it, and you look at the shutters, this triple window should never have these little 12-inch shutters on them. What it does, I have a friend of mine, Charlie Scott, he's a national consultant, and he said that's one of his pet peeves, because what happens is that once you do that, then you no longer have an authentic story for what the house is representing. And so people say to me all the time, well, Todd, we have triple windows, we're using shutters, so how do you deal that? Well, what you basically do is you do shutters where appropriate, and then if you have triple windows or larger windows, then just do trim around them as opposed to trying to put a shutters there. Here's another example, a great example of a lot of trim around larger windows, but shutters as well. So you can definitely mix it. Once you do shutters or commit to shutters, you don't have to do shutters on every single window. Here's an example of when the shutters are too small, how inauthentic that looks on this window. This one I couldn't really understand because it's basically a rectangular window, but then it has these odd shaped shutters, so that was great. My favorite one though that I've seen is the bay window shutter combo. So these are obviously things that you're looking to avoid. Here's some great examples of shutters and how they're half of the window size. They look like they can close. I even like the ones to the right here where they're just a single shutter, but they still look very authentic. Here's putting it all together. Here's one of my favorite houses in terms of what not to do. We'll start with the odd shaped shutters with the rectangular window, and then go to what appears to be a stone transom. I think they had windows designed there initially and then ended up putting stone in there. And you can see they did it again, the same kind of window treatment here, and again here. And then they did stone kind of coin here, which is odd. But worst of all, they did stone shutters. So if you look at what's happening here, you have a window, what appears to be like a shutter look, and it's made out of stone. Moving on, I'm going to the trends that I see that will be strong for 21. And the first thing, and Helen, you'll speak to this, let me see. Is this idea of black interior framed glass. We do that all the time now on new and renovated houses. It's when you have an area that you want to have semi-private, but still want to be able to see into. We do it for studies, dens, that kind of thing all the time. It's just a nice way to separate the space visually, but still have a nice look. We did it so much that we actually put it in our office because we want to show people what it looks like. So it's been very, very popular this last year. In terms of fireplaces, another trend. What we see all the time is a fireplace like this with a TV stacked over top of the fireplace. And basically what you have is you have a mantle, and then there's the television, and the mantle gets really crowded when you try to decorate around it. So as a result, a lot of people don't decorate around it, and they end up having this mantle with very low accessories and a television above. So even in a model, someone's merchandise this, it still looks very, very crowded. So a couple ideas that we've looked at. One is to take, if you're doing a television above the fireplace, take the mantle all the way across the wall, and that way you can still bring color in without having to crowd the television. Another way that I really like this one, and that's basically to not have the television necessarily over the fireplace, but have it in its own separate but distinct architecture. So the fireplace is its own element, and the television entertainment area is its own element. Here's another way to handle if you have the fireplace or the television over the fireplace, but still able to bring accessories in by pulling off shelving to the sides. Another one of my favorite trends for 21 is this idea of what we're doing with laundry spaces. So when I started designing houses, we used to have a garage, have a small laundry right off the garage. And what essentially would happen is you'd walk through the garage, walk through the laundry and all the junk, and get into the kitchen. And so finally we wised up and we said, okay, here's what we gotta do. We gotta create a family entrance with a drop zone, its own separate laundry, so you have cubbies and benches and stuff, and you're not seeing all the junk. Well, what happened to that, as a result of that, is that we started getting really, really good at organizing and keeping things looking clean. So, and the appliances started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So it made it difficult to make this separate, smaller laundry room and a separate mudroom. So what we're doing a lot now is this idea of an ultimate family entry, where you walk in and instead of feeling like you're in a small mudroom or a small family entry, you're in this larger space that still has the washer and dryer in it. It has cubbies, it has a bench, it has the opportunity to do a desk in there. And here's an example of how one looks. You have the washer and dryer here. You still have all the drop zone, all the places for kids to do homework. And it's a large space. It's not this little confined space that you're walking into. And cubbies and benches. This is my house. My wife Katie and I built our house in 16. And the way it was designed was to have this family entry in a laundry. And that's what we were planning on doing. But as we got into building it, just the last minute, we decided to open the whole thing up and make it a family entrance. And I'm so glad we did, because what happens is it brings light into the space. It seems so much easier. Everything still looks organized and neat, but it's not this little tiny laundry room and little tiny mud room that you're fighting with. So the ultimate family entry is one of my favorite trends that I've been seeing over the last year or so. In terms of what's happening with kitchens, so everybody that we've been working with in the past year or so has been doing these very, very simple kitchens. It's an L-shaped kitchen, a big island. A lot of times the sink is on the island. It's flush, and it's very, very simple. Very limited cabinetry, but what happens is we're able to pick that storage space up elsewhere. Here's an example. Very clean, simple. This is my house actually. There's not a lot of cabinetry here, but for us, these cabinets are empty up here because we're using a lot of storage in the island behind here. The stuff that you don't use every day. So you do a 24 cabinet and a 12, and then behind here I've got a large pantry and a beverage station. Even on very narrow townhomes, this is a 16-foot townhome. And it's very tempting to do, a peninsula here to try to give yourself more cabinetry. But we're instead just doing one wall. So you can see it's just one large wall. We still brought windows in. You have the kitchen, the range, and the ovens. And it still all works well with the big island. We're also seeing, and Helen, you might be seeing this too, but we're also seeing a lot more shelving in kitchens. Open shelving, instead of just completely all the uppers all the way across, we're seeing a lot of open shelving. The other thing that's been important is to bring natural light in. So we're sacrificing uppers in many cases to bring in natural light. You still have the lowers below it, but it's really making a big difference in the way the kitchen looks. We're also seeing a lot of these very large pantries. Some of them are working pantries where you actually have cabinets inside of them and you keep your appliances there. Here's an example of one that's just open to the kitchen. So it still is it's still very attractive, but you can get a lot of use out of that space. The fifth trend for 21 is we're seeing more and more of these, what the industry calls nano walls, but really it's a collapsible door or accordion door system. And what's great about it is one of the reasons we're seeing more and more is because the costs are coming down. There's a lot more competition than there used to be in terms of building these things. So the costs are coming down, it's becoming more reasonable, and we're seeing them all over the place. This one was pretty cool because it does have a peninsula in its kitchen, so you have a half of one that goes here, and then full ones that stop here. There's all kinds of different configurations. This is a house we designed for a local builder here, and he did a half accordion wall all the way across here as well. So he looks out into his pool, creates a glass rail, and opens completely up, which is pretty neat because before that, I hadn't considered it for anything other than full height glass and full height wall. So it was pretty neat to do. And piecing some of this together, this is a current TK project that we just completed a bit ago. And basically, we took this dingy kind of cottage, and it's actually my neighborhood, so it was kind of fun to work on. And we updated it, brightened up the colors, put a nice little bay window on the front of it, add some stone and flower boxes. So just really updated the way it looked. And you can see the before and after picture, what a difference it makes. In the back, this is so funny because this is on the lakeside. So it had the most unfortunate window configuration. The whole family cracked up about it at all times. So we changed that right away. We brightened it up, made it look a lot cheerier, and you can see what the difference is between the before and after. The interior, we had this kind of dark, outdated kitchen that really wasn't very functional. It had a peninsula, the placement of the appliances weren't great, and then we had very little natural light in there. So this is what we ended up doing. We ended up pulling out the peninsula, putting in a large island, large simple island, making an L-shaped kitchen, putting in more natural light. Like I said earlier, we're sacrificing some uppers for natural light. So that's what we did in this one to update this kitchen. And you see it's pretty dramatic difference between before and after. This is a view looking out towards the water side, another view of the kitchen. Again, plenty of storage space, a lot more functional. This is what was nice about this great room is it had really good bones. So we just basically modified that a touch. Here's what the existing great room was. We really opened it up. And by putting full doors across here, as opposed to one single door, we were able to change the furnishing to allow the furnishing to sit up against this wall, so it didn't feel as tight walking by it. And then there's another view, but again, it had great bones in the ceiling. It was fun to work with. We ended up making a little beverage station right here. This is looking back at the kitchen. The stairway was kind of right in the way of everything, so we tore that out and changed where the stairway enters, which is right here, and just made it a lot more open, a lot cheerier. And on the outside, this was kind of fun, and this was something that the builder actually conceived of. There was a little window above the cathedral ceiling in the great room, and as we were putting this bedroom in, he came up with the idea of putting in a memory point, which was basically putting in a little bed above there. So you go up a number of steps into this little bed, and you get natural light that comes in. And it's just a great way to bring a memory point into a renovation. So that's what I have for today. I appreciate the time and being able to speak to you guys. And of course, if you have any questions, I'm available to answer those.
So Todd, if I can go first, I love your before and after photos. They're so much fun to look at because you change things from A to Z. So those were great examples. I just want to mention, because you brought up the interior window walls, those partition walls that we're seeing a lot in black. I just want to mention that Steve Friedman, one of our members, his son Justin owns WeldWorks, which is doing those custom made in the Detroit area. I'm not sure if everyone was aware of that.
You know, I'm glad you said that because I heard about that just recently and I didn't know that. And
it's very impressive. Yeah, they'll give you a tour of their operation. They're doing work all over the country, but they're right here in our backyard. So installation and shipping and is a lot less expensive for us, obviously.
I was gonna say, I heard they're reasonable, right?
Yeah.
And are you doing it in your practice? Are you finding that you're using those a lot?
We're doing them in clubhouses because we can spend more money in clubhouses. We're not seeing them so much at the interior of our homes at this point because our homes are more that, you know, production or semi-custom. They're not the super high-end custom homes, but we are seeing them in clubhouses, and we are hearing people talk more about bringing them into their residences at a lower price point. What Steve does is custom and gorgeous, and they do the pivot doors and, you know, the pocket doors, and they do a beautiful job. We have to see the prices come down on a more production type to bring them into the lower price point homes. But definitely something that everyone loves to see, just the openness between spaces, the transparency. It's a very big hit with everyone that's seen them.
Awesome. Thank you.
Todd, very impressive the work that you do on the change that you can do with somebody's house like that. I mean, to have the insight and the vision to be able to do them is very impressive. I would say my market is not quite at that point. Mine are little Berkeley bungalows and small homes like that I've got about, you know, very relatively limited budgets, but it's very inspiring to see the types of things that, especially the trends you're going to, that you can possibly incorporate at a much smaller scale in some of the projects, you know, that I do.
Well, thank you. You know, I'm kind of glad that we had this today because I was going to tell you, Mike, and Randy, this is something we might need to talk about. We don't really have a remodeler partner. We send a lot of we get a lot of remodel walk-ins in our company, and we send them out to just builders that are just kind of building houses that we know of. So we don't really work with any remodelers necessarily, but if that's something, maybe down the road we should talk about it.
I think that'd be great because, I mean, realistically, my kitchens are $30,000 kitchens, you know,
right.
$30,000 to $40,000 kitchens. So they're much more limited, and they're like, you know, 200 square feet. So I like it as a challenge. What can you do in a small space, you know, to open things up or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I would not be the type of builder who would do those types of renovations that you're doing.
Is that something that you would be interested in ultimately, or not really?
Maybe not really. I think it's bigger than I want to be at this point. But you know, in smaller jobs, there may be, you know, you start getting into the, you know, some of the Huntington Woods and some of the Birminghams where they've got a budget that can do a little bit more from that standpoint.
Got it.
So yeah, I'd like to talk with you maybe, you know, sometime in the future and talk about, you know, partnering up on some of those, I would say, little jobs compared to the stuff that you're showing there.
We get plenty of those too.
Okay.
And I'll add, Todd, that since we're recording this, and this will go out to everybody who registered, so maybe a few more remodelers, you know, that your appeal that you just made may not fall on completely deaf ears either.
Yeah, I would love to talk with people.
Actually, since we're recording this as we go on, if there's nothing else to share, Todd, if you could stop sharing your screen, we can each other.
Yeah, let me just figure out how to do that.
Just go down to share screen and click on stop sharing.
Okay.
On your Zoom page.
So I'm on a Zoom. Hold on, let me get some technical help here, Mike. It'll just take a second. Hey,
So while Todd's getting his tech support there, part of this started out, or the concept started out with Randy and Susan talking about trends that were occurring in the parade of homes. And that's ended up being where we settled on having Todd, who participates with several of our HBA builders in their parade homes and stuff of that nature. But if you're not familiar with our Parade of Homes program, it's an annual program every year for new home builders. If you go to paradehba.com, you can see the 60 homes that we currently have entered in the Parade of Homes. This year, the Parade of Homes is a little bit different because of everything that's happened this year. So we've had 2 phases of the Parade of Homes. Typically, it runs June 1st to June 30th. And then the website's up through the end of the year. We kicked it off on June 1st with a virtual parade, and then we came out with our program, our actual printed program, which you should be receiving in the mail if you haven't already received it, and an online component, advertising component through the Free Press and Detroit News. So again, you want to see some of what's going on with those houses. The virtual tours, Matterport kind of tours, are pretty advanced now. So again, for your remodeling clients, definitely encourage that you check out what new home builders are doing, because as Todd showed, you can, even though it may be a substantial remodel that he showed, all those design trends that you're seeing, exterior, interior, consulting with somebody like Helen, who also consults and supports a lot of our parade builders, you can incorporate that modern look into an existing home out in Berkeley, right? So just a point to be made there.
So Mike, there's photos of all 60 homes, thorough photos of all 60 online?
Yes. Yeah.
Good.
There may be a couple of those 60 homes that are in design currently. They're to be built homes. So some of them have renderings, but most of them have photos. And especially if they do exist, then they've probably been staged as a minimum, if not already built for an owner.
So I have a question for Todd, if that's okay. Doug, do you want to go first?
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead, Helen.
Oh, okay. So Todd, of course, with what we're seeing and everyone working from home, home office space has been a huge topic for us. I'm sure it is for you as well. We're trying to find little pockets to put desk areas in, even when a home isn't large enough to accommodate all the people working and going to school from home. So that's a challenge, but also we've always seen these open floor plans as being so popular the last 10, 20 years. And now open floor plans make it difficult to even hear what you're thinking when you're working at home or doing a Zoom and someone else is doing a conference call. So how are you handling that? How are you addressing that going forward? What's changing in how you're looking at interiors to get these areas worked in?
that's a great question. What we're finding really where we're trying to focus is off the kitchen. So, whereas we don't have a formal dining anymore, as you know, we'll still have a study, but then we're working really hard to find space off the kitchen to create something that's a little better than a pocket office. It's more like it's an upgrade from a pocket office. And really, what we found the key is to get an outside window. We have if you don't have an outside window, it feels like you're in a closet. So that's been key. Once you can get that outside window, then it works. So we have a number of builders that are working on developing new product that are employing that. Great question.
I think we called those command centers for a while, where it was a small office for her and it was off the kitchen and it usually had a window if you could work it out. So maybe we're just changing the.
Yeah, well, we called them mom's offices for a while too, because they were a little bigger than a command center. And the command center to me is close to being akin to a pocket office as well. So it's a little, it's like one step up. It's not huge. It might be 8 by 10, but it's reasonable.
Do they do any, like they used to do the kitchens where they have a little desk? It's right next to the cabinets and stuff like that.
Not yet.
Taking those out, I mean,
Yeah, not yet. I mean, it might bounce back, but I'm not seeing that at all yet.
go ahead. Don.
My question, again, the last few years, I have seen the outdoor or the outside look of homes with the brick, and the whole Tetris thing you're saying. I like that look because our house in Troy has a similar look, but the one that was all just looks like it had COVID on it. What made the builder decide to go that route, or did the homeowner like that look?
Well, we didn't design it, so I'll
Right.
tell you that. So thank you for bringing that up because I want to make that clear. We didn't, nor did we design the other Tetris looking one. These are just photographs that I found as I'm driving around as things not to do. So thank you for bringing that up. For a while, this European, like French country look was very popular. And in that French country look, there was a lot of mixture of stone and brick. And some of them did it right, and some of them did it very wrong. And that was an example of very wrong.
Gotcha. And the other thing, I like what you said about the TV and the fireplace. We have a ton of barn wood, hand-hewn barn beams, circular sawn beams, and we'll get a few questions about how wide, but it's nice to know how long we should actually consult our clients or, the do-it-yourselfers at home regarding how wide, because you're right, you can only put so much above on it from a TV perspective if you have frames and pictures and things like that. So, and the same thing with our floating shelves, reclaimed material, same thing too. Wonderful idea.
Thank you.
Are black windows still an in thing for everybody?
From my standpoint, yes. Helen, what do you think?
I completely agree.
Is it black inside and outside or just on the outside?
Both, inside and outside.
And of course, we're seeing black on faucets and light fixtures and door hardware, and the prices have come down. Now they're trickling down to reasonable price points and very, very popular. And I think they'll be classics. I think they'll have the staying power.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of the black at all. The colored ones I am, but on black I'm not afraid of at all.
Is that black or is it dark bronze?
Black,
You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's black. It's black.
black.
Matte black.
Yeah.
Matt.
Kitchens still pretty much white kitchens is the most popular.
I can speak to that. I can tell you that we're tired of white kitchens. We've been doing them for a long time and we're seeing them everywhere. So now we're getting away from white kitchens ourselves. Of course, there's some beautiful grays coming into the cabinet offerings, but we're also seeing the light wood tones coming back, kind of an oatmeal. So not the yellow of a natural maple that we did 20 years ago, but more of a soft, muddy, light wood for floors and or cabinets. And we're also seeing cabinets in two-tone finishes. So the uppers being one finish and the lowers being another, versus the islands being the second finish. So are you following me on that?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very, very popular. And mixing in a solid color like a white or a gray with a wood tone, heavy graining. There's some beautiful options out there. Charcoals are very beautiful in cabinets as well. You don't want to do an espresso because an espresso feels dated, but you go to a charcoal and you get that same really bold, dramatic effect. We're also seeing dark countertops come back where we're using those light finishes on the cabinets and then going to a dark countertop, which is a nice change from this Carrera look that we see everywhere, everywhere you go. We're also seeing a lot of running those countertops up the back wall versus a tile backsplash. So that's also beautiful to have that continuous element with those continuous patterns of graining from your countertop to your back wall. And it's easy to clean, easy to maintain. So a good option to doing a tile.
On that, Alan, are people still doing the waterfall on the islands?
They are, but we're also getting a little tired of that as well, because now you see it everywhere. So anytime it trickles down and everyone's doing it, you have to move on to the next thing when you're.
I know, I was tired of it the first time I saw it. I'm like, I'm tired of
Yeah.
this right now. I hated it.
Yeah, I like it. I still like all of it. I still like white cabinets, but you have to move on to a new look.
Yeah.
When everyone's doing it in every room, you have to move on to a new look
Yeah,
if you want to stay, you know, more on the cutting edge.
very good. Thank you.
What about exteriors in terms of siding? I mean, here in Huntington Woods, if you ever do a remodel, they pretty much request that you have to do a cement board siding. They don't want vinyl siding, even though you know, from the street, sometimes it looks the same. But they definitely like the cement board siding. And then in Berkeley, vinyl siding. And, you know, they do both. Where is the trends along those lines? Is everything cement board siding anymore, or is it strictly a cost thing?
It's kind of a cost thing. You know, we do some LP smart side, which is what's nice about that. It's a little easier on the framers to put up. It's lighter. It's easier to cut. It's still a good material. But generally speaking, I mean, Randy, it's about where you're talking. It's a budget thing usually. We see a lot more board and batten right now, only because of the farm kind of influence.
Todd, this has been really good for me, as you know, having just got done finished working with you on doing a major remod. It just brings a lot of things to light. So I know one of the things I'm going to want to, first of all, I really like what we did with the kitchen and the floor plan with that family entry that you just done talking about. I think that's going to be really handy, and then actually moving the lawn off of the master bedroom, I think that's going to work out really well. I think I need to rethink the windows. I'm thinking, since I'm doing 95% of them, we might as well do 100% of them and make them all dark or black.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
there were just some other things with the cabinets idea. This idea of getting away from the white and going into a wood tone, and then trying to figure out what the flooring is going to look like when we're done with that. Because that I think putting the wood cabinets in with the wood floors, how do you work that so it balances properly? I think will be another discussion. And then the last part is balancing the exterior materials.
Yeah.
Getting that stone tied in with the cedar shake, tied in with the lap siding and or the just vertical siding, and trying to make that work on an old house.
Right.
And we're gonna talk about that again too. But this has been, for me, it's been really great just to kind of focus in on what we did and some of the things that we could still do if we wanted to, and that Mike hasn't started yet. So
Yeah, it sounds
this is great. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. The kitchen stuff, the kitchen wood floor, that's definitely more of a Helen area than it is me, you know, in terms of the colors and things. But I thought that was interesting that was brought up, that wood tones are starting to come into play.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought so too. And I've always liked wood, but I've kind of been getting shut down on the wood a little bit. I want to make sure I'm looking at the option. You know where I'm coming from.
Now you've got some ammo. You got some ammo.
Yeah. So that's a good thought.
Mike and Randy, I do have a 1 o'clock, so I do have to unfortunately move on. Are there any final questions that anyone might have?
No, we'll just talk about you after you leave.
Okay, that's fine. I'm used to it.
I have one quick question, Todd. If you're doing black windows from the outside, do you do the gutters and downspouts automatically in black, or not necessarily? What else has to be black?
Not necessarily. I mean, sometimes we do, but sometimes it looks horrible because the trim isn't right. So a lot of times we'll match the trim.
So the only thing black is your windows at that point. You're not bringing in black anywhere else?
I mean, we are, sometimes we'll bring in black, like a lot of times we'll do, if it's gonna be a little edgier, like we'll do black columns and other black, you know, certainly shutters or whatever, but sometimes we'll do black columns or black brackets. It just depends on the house.
Thanks.
Okay.